This is a story about a mother's anguish as she fights for justice for her daughter. At the start, we see a woman driving home in her car when she notices 3 billboards along the road. Curious, she pulls over and studies the billboards, clearly lost in thought. Soon after, she visits the company responsible for managing the billboards. There, she meets a man named Red and tells him she wants to advertise on those specific billboards along Drinkwater Road. Since the road doesn't get much traffic anymore, the ad space is relatively cheap. She secures a deal to rent the billboards for a month for $5,000 and hands over the content to be displayed. She also insists on a year-long contract, ensuring the billboards can't be rented to anyone else during that time. The advertisements go up, and they carry 3 powerful messages, one on each billboard. The first reads, "Raped while dying." The second says, "And still no arrests." And the third asks, "How come, Chief Willoughby?" This question is directed at the local police chief, Willoughby, highlighting the lack of action in her daughter's case. The woman, named Mildred, has been mourning her daughter's brutal murder. 7 months earlier, her daughter was raped, killed, and left by the roadside. Frustrated with the police for failing to find the culprits, Mildred uses the billboards to call out their negligence and demand justice. The bold messages catch the attention of the media, and a reporter interviews Mildred. During the interview, she expresses her frustration, saying her daughter hasn't received justice, her body remains buried, and the police seem to be doing nothing. She asks, "Are our children not safe on the roads anymore?" The billboards also stir up trouble for Chief Willoughby, who is deeply upset by the public criticism. He visits Mildred and insists he's doing everything he can. Willoughby argues that the billboards are a pointless gesture and asks her to take them down. However, Mildred refuses, determined to keep the pressure on. During the conversation, Willoughby reveals he has cancer, hoping this might change her mind. He doesn't want to leave behind a legacy tarnished by accusations of incompetence. But Mildred is unmoved and responds that the time he's spending trying to convince her would be better spent finding her daughter's killer and preventing future tragedies. Meanwhile, another officer, Dixon, is furious about the billboards. He respects Willoughby as a good man and a capable police chief, and he doesn't want his reputation dragged through the mud. Dixon confronts Red, pleading with him to reconsider the ads since Willoughby is already dealing with terminal cancer. Most of the town sides with Willoughby, believing him to be a good person, and they oppose Mildred's actions. Even Mildred's visit to a local dentist turns hostile when the dentist, who disapproves of her campaign, tries to harm her. In self-defense, Mildred stabs his thumb with a dental tool. The police intervene and take Mildred to the station, where Willoughby attempts to reason with her again. He brings up her financial struggles, noting that she sold her ex-husband's old tractor just to pay for 1 month of the billboard rental. Mildred is divorced, and her ex-husband now lives with a 19-year-old girl. During their tense discussion, Willoughby starts coughing up blood, alarming Mildred. She rushes to get help, and he's taken to the hospital by ambulance. This incident deeply affects Dixon, leaving him furious and heartbroken. Even within her own family, Mildred faces resistance. Her son tells her that while he understands her grief, seeing the billboards every day only reopens old wounds and makes it impossible for him to move on from the trauma of losing his sister. Mildred's son explains his frustration because he desperately wants to escape the constant reminders of his sister's death. He longs for peace and to move forward, but the billboards, broadcasting the gruesome details of her murder, trap him in the pain of the past, making it impossible to heal. The story then shifts into a flashback, showing the day Angela, Mildred's daughter, left the house for the last time. Angela asks her mother for the car, but Mildred refuses. This sparks a heated argument between them. Angela, in her frustration, yells that she's leaving and sarcastically says, "I hope someone rapes me on the way." In anger, Mildred fires back, saying, "I hope so too." Both are consumed by their emotions and don't mean what they say. But tragically, Angela's words turn into reality. This incident adds to the deep-rooted tension in their family. Mildred is already struggling because her husband has left her, and the children lack a father's support. The trauma of losing Angela in such a horrific way, coupled with the fact that the killer hasn't been brought to justice, leaves Mildred grief-stricken and determined to fight for justice. However, her battle raises a moral dilemma. Is what she's doing to Chief Willoughby justified, given that he's a good man and dying of cancer? Many in the town, especially Officer Dixon, believe her actions are unfair to Willoughby. Dixon, who works in the police department and deeply respects the chief, is particularly upset. In his anger, Dixon and one of his colleagues fabricate charges to arrest Mildred. They claim she possesses 2 marijuana cigarettes and use this as leverage, telling her to take down the billboards if she wants the charges dropped. This infuriates Mildred, but she refuses to back down. Meanwhile, the $5,000 Mildred initially paid for the billboard rental runs out. Red, the billboard company employee, informs her she needs to pay again to keep the ads up. Mildred, however, doesn't have the money. Unknown to her, Red is sympathetic to Willoughby's situation and secretly hopes the billboards will come down soon. As Red and Mildred discuss the payment, Red's assistant walks in with an envelope containing $5,000, the exact amount needed to extend the rental for another month. Nobody knows who sent the money, but it ensures the billboards stay up, much to the frustration of Willoughby's supporters. Later, Willoughby is shown spending quality time with his family on a picnic. That evening, after everyone has gone to bed, he takes his own life. In his suicide note, he explains that while he could endure the physical pain of cancer, he couldn't bear watching his family suffer as they helplessly witnessed his decline. He leaves heartfelt letters for his wife, Mildred, and Dixon. Willoughby's death devastates the entire police department, but it hits Dixon the hardest. Overcome with rage and grief, he storms into Red's office, the man who rented the billboards to Mildred, and beats him mercilessly before throwing him out of the window. Red is severely injured after being thrown from the window, but a man witnesses the entire incident. This man, Abercrombie, is the new chief of police, taking over after Willoughby's death. Abercrombie confronts Dixon and suspends him immediately for his violent actions. Meanwhile, with Willoughby's passing, the town's hatred toward Mildred reaches new heights. While she's at her store, a stranger threatens her, but Willoughby's wife arrives just in time, causing the man to leave. Willoughby's wife hands Mildred a letter he wrote before his death. In the letter, Willoughby expresses regret that Mildred felt he didn't care about Angela's case, clarifying that the lack of evidence tied his hands. He also acknowledges her cleverness with the billboards, admitting they were a bold move. To help her keep them up without implicating himself, Willoughby reveals he anonymously paid for another month's rent. That night, Mildred returns home to discover her 3 billboards engulfed in flames. Despite her efforts to extinguish the fire, the advertisements are completely destroyed. Heartbroken, Mildred is left in despair. On the other side, Dixon, now suspended, receives a call informing him that Willoughby left him a letter, which he can collect from the station after hours. That night, Dixon retrieves the letter, where Willoughby encourages him to let go of his anger and hatred, urging him to embrace love and peace, to become the great detective he has the potential to be. Fueled by her suspicion that someone in the police department burned her billboards, Mildred decides to retaliate. She prepares Molotov cocktails and throws them at the police station, setting it ablaze. Unbeknownst to her, Dixon is inside with music playing in his ears, oblivious to the fire. When an explosion occurs, Dixon realizes the station is on fire. Grabbing Angela's case file, he narrowly escapes but sustains severe burns. Mildred is devastated upon learning that Dixon was injured because of her actions. Dixon is taken to the hospital where he's placed under heavy bandages. Despite their violent history, Red visits him, offering a glass of orange juice and expressing forgiveness. Dixon, deeply moved by Willoughby's letter, apologizes to Red for throwing him out the window, showing genuine remorse for his past actions. The next day, a man from the billboard company visits Mildred to inform her that the company will replace the burnt posters at no extra cost. Encouraged, Mildred and her friends restore the billboards. Around the same time, the police release Mildred's friend, who had been wrongfully arrested by Dixon. A few days later, Dixon, still recovering, sits in a bar when he overhears a man boasting about raping a girl months ago. Dixon realizes this man was the same one who threatened Mildred in her store. Quietly noting the man's car number, Dixon confronts him, pretending to perform a magic trick by scratching the man's cheek to collect DNA evidence. This leads to a violent altercation, and Dixon is beaten badly, but manages to make it home. Dixon scratches the man's cheek to collect his skin and blood for DNA testing, hoping to match it with the evidence from Angela's case. Although Dixon is badly injured in the process, he succeeds in gathering the sample. Meanwhile, at a bar, Mildred is with another man when her ex-husband Charlie arrives. Charlie, now dating a 19-year-old girl, confesses to Mildred that he was the one who set her billboards on fire, blaming it on being drunk at the time. While Charlie expresses grief over their daughter's rape and murder, he insists that burning the billboards billboards wasn't the solution. As Charlie returns to his table with his young girlfriend, Mildred approaches him with a bottle of champagne. Charlie braces for an outburst, but is surprised when Mildred calmly says, "Take care of her." She acknowledges that the girl is the same age as Angela and walks away. The next morning, Dixon visits Mildred and informs her about the man from the bar. He explains that he overheard him confessing to a rape and collected his DNA sample, which is now being tested. Dixon shares this to give Mildred hope that justice might still be served. Mildred, touched by his effort, thanks him. Their hatred has given way to mutual respect and understanding. Later, Dixon receives the DNA results from the lab. To his dismay, the man is not connected to Angela's case. The results show he was out of the country on military duty when Angela was attacked. However, Dixon remains convinced that the man is guilty of other crimes, as he had confessed to assaulting someone. Disheartened, Dixon informs Mildred about the results. She is crushed, having held on to hope that her daughter's killer would finally be brought to justice. Despite this setback, Dixon shares his belief that the man is still a criminal who deserves punishment. The next day, Dixon and Mildred decide to confront the man. They set out on a road trip to Idaho, where he lives, armed with the intention of finding answers. On the way, Mildred confesses to Dixon that she was the one who burned down the police station. Dixon admits he already suspected as much. As they drive, Mildred asks Dixon if he truly plans to kill the man. Dixon replies, "No." Mildred echoes his sentiment, adding, "Neither do I, but we'll figure it out on the way." The film ends with the two of them heading toward Idaho, united in their shared quest for justice and closure.